And welcome into another Mueller Sports Report and Mueller in the Morning. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope you're drinking some coffee, some healthy water, some juice, whatever it is that gets you through your day. I'm going to take a nice big chug of water so we can get started here. So today, as I said in my first Mueller in the Morning, I probably won't be spending many of these on the Cleveland Browns, only because there's some things coming down the pike that I will hold on to for now that are related to my team at the OBR, and so I don't want to cannibalize that at all. So there's generally not going to be a lot of Browns on this, especially when some other things get started. But today's just the right day to talk a little bit about the Cleveland Browns, and honestly to talk about offensive tackles. Because it's Friday and I know all of you are rushing to work, I want to get this up. So we may only get about 10 minutes in, and that is okay. And so, listen, here's the reality. The Browns need at least one offensive tackle, maybe two, and thankfully this offseason gives us an opportunity, right? And that's really the thing that Browns fans should be pretty thankful of, is that, let's start with, we know a lot about the offensive tackles in the NFL draft. When you look at that list, Trevor Sikma from the Draft Network put out something yesterday basically saying there are four guys who would be offensive tackle number one in pretty much any other draft or a lot of other drafts. And I think he's right at some level. I'll talk about why that might be wrong a little bit. But when you look at Mekhi Becton, Tristan Wirfs, Andrew Thomas, and Jedrick Wills, depending on a lot of things about what your team likes and all of that, those are four guys that in a lot of other drafts are going to be considered number one type offensive tackles, going to be top guys, top 10 guys, those kind of things. And so just the blessing that while the Browns are looking for an offensive tackle, they're doing so in a draft that has them, right? And so I'm not done talking about the draft prospects, and there's some other names in the list that I think are good to be aware of. But we've seen it, Browns fans. You've seen drafts where the Browns need a quarterback and there are none, right? And so you see drafts where the Browns need this player or that type of player, and they don't exist. And so, and the same thing in free agency, you see years where the Browns need certain things and they're just not available to them, especially at some of the important positions. And so this year, at the major need, and I think that's really important to say, is that the major need, the Browns have options. And so, unfortunately, at one of the other needs that I see on the team, edge rusher, I don't really see a lot of options. So it's not that everything is roses and sunshine for the Browns, but I think it's really fun to see that starting in the NFL draft class, there are offensive tackles that I would start today. There are multiple ones. And so looking at the list, so we talked about Wills and Thomas and Becton and Wirfs, but then you have Josh Jones out of Houston, Austin Jackson out of USC, Lucas Niang out of TCU, Prince Tega Wanaho out of Auburn, Matthew Pert out of UConn, Ezra Cleveland. Like, those are guys that, left or right, I'm ready to start. Now, will some of them not be good? That's just the way it works in the NFL. Maybe, but you're talking about like 10 guys that in year one, I'd be okay starting, right? Now, I'll just be honest. I, along with a number of other people, specifically at Pro Football Focus, have started to really believe that left tackle, right tackle isn't as big of a difference, that it's not about I need a great left tackle and a okay right tackle. A tackle needs to be a tackle. They need to be able to block good pass rushers, and good pass rushers move around. And not only that, when you talk about Blindside, well, if Baker Mayfield is looking to the left side of the field, his right tackle is his now blindside protector. It's the way it works, right? If his first read is over to Odell Beckham Jr. on the left side of the formation, or Jarvis Landry, or whoever, it doesn't matter who the person is, if his body is going to be slightly turned, that his blind side is now his right ear. Now, if he is naturally, as a right-handed quarterback looking to the primary, the middle of the field or to the right of the field, then his left side is his blind side. And so again, his left ear is where he needs to feel pressure. But that's where the value of a quarterback who can feel some pressure, who understands where pressure is, understands timing in the pocket and those kind of things, is pressure is going to be pressure, especially on the outside. And from that, the tackle's position, for me, right tackle and left tackle are basically equally valuable because they're moving the Von Millers and the Myles Garretts, and all of those players are getting moved all over the field. They're lining up as linebackers sometimes and blitzing from wherever. They're lining up left. They're lining up right. They're lining up all over the place. And blindside changes depending on where the first primary read for a quarterback is. So I think we overstate that, the injury that led to the movie The Blind Side and the conversation with Lawrence Taylor and all of that. I think we overstate that now in the NFL. But so if we do overstate that, there are 10 tackles for Jared, again, just for me, that I would be totally okay with starting in year one. Some would be better than others, but I would totally be okay with 10 tackles starting in year one. The problem is teams are not the same. And I actually wrote this on Twitter to a response to a group of tweets that I received when I woke up. And that is that, unfortunately for teams, it's less that. A general analysis is that there are 4 top level offensive tackles and maybe 10 starting level offensive tackles as rookies. Teams are a little different. Teams generally don't have the same number as the general analysis because they know medicals, they know personalities, they know how they fit on a team, and they also know how they fit with a scheme. And so while it might be 4 and it might be 10, for the Browns it might be 2 and it might be 5. Right? And that's where things become a little stickier, is if it's 2 and it's 5 and the Browns are picking number 10, all of a sudden the certainty factor drops. And that's where fear, at least my fear, can start to come in, is if the Browns are high, and my guess, and I'm not saying I'm right, my guess is the Browns are high on Tristan Wirfs, could be high on Andrew Thomas, are going to be low on Becton, and I'm not totally sure on Wills, right? That's kind of where I'm at with where I see the offensive tackles. It's not that I don't think Becton or Wills are good, and it's not that I think Wirfs and Thomas are significantly better, but I'm trying to look at fit for the team and how things work out, and that's just kind of how I would see it. So if it is Wirfs and Thomas, and the Giants and the Panthers, no, not the Panthers, sorry, now they made that trade. The Giants make that deal for Wirfs, or make the draft pick of Wirfs, and then the Chargers, sorry, that's who the trade with the Panthers was, and the Chargers, like Thomas, well, all of a sudden the Browns then at number 10 could have either or both of Wills and Becton, who I at this point think would be their 3rd and 4th. And then maybe they don't want them at 10, right? Maybe that fit isn't there, even though they're very talented tackles, the fit, the medicals, the background, the whatever, maybe they don't have them as high. Or, listen, let's say I'm wrong. Maybe it's not Wirfs and maybe it's not Thomas. Maybe it is Wills and Becton. But again, no one would be surprised if Dave Gettleman at 4 is like, wow, this dude is 6'7", 360. Becton is huge and he can move and he can run. Look at that 40. I have to have that hog molly. Right? No one would be shocked by that. And then Wills, who is an Alabama guy and, showed a lot of physical talent and all of that kind of stuff. Wouldn't be surprised if another team, the Cardinals or again, the Chargers, whoever it is. So I think it's just important to realize that even though I would say there's 4 guys who I would be okay with, or generally speaking would say, like Trevor, their top, offensive tackles won in a lot of different drafts. And I think there's 10 guys who I would start in year one. The Browns probably don't have that same thing. It's just not the way NFL teams just don't grade general players. They grade players for their team. And I think that's where some interesting stuff in the last couple of days on the free agent and trade market comes up. And that, listen, I get it. I know there are a lot of people who are like, no, don't spend your money. This is a great offensive tackle class. And they're right. It is a great offensive tackle class. It doesn't mean it's a great offensive tackle class available for the Browns at number 10 or 41 or a trade down or a trade up. So I don't want a team like the Browns relying solely on something they don't have total control over. Listen, if they had the number 1 overall pick and wanted to pick a tackle and knew they were going to get their tackle at number 1, that's a different conversation. But right now at number 10 and 41, and there's so many variables that all 4 of those guys could be off the board. It's unlikely, but they could be off the board before the Browns pick at number 10. And so going into the draft, assuming that, or assuming they would trade down and get someone like Ezra Cleveland or, Josh Jones, or later get the Prince or Matt Pert, again, I think that just is I think it's just a lot of assumptions. And so over the last couple of days, 2 players have now become available that I think should interest the Browns, and that's Jason Peters, the very old tackle from Philadelphia. But again, Andrew Berry was there for a year, knows him at least a little bit, knows about him, knows what he's able to do, knows that he's a solid veteran. And then Trent Williams is now available in trade. And again, while people will talk about his contract, which I understand, he's got $12.5 million on the last year of his deal, so he's going to want an extension. And really didn't make any money last year, and the Browns have to trade a draft pick. You're also talking about a top 5 type tackle, right? Now, injuries and all of that stuff that's going to have to be kind of checked out, but that's the Browns' job anyways. That's something they need to be doing and are going to do. And so if the Browns can get a starting level left tackle for a 3rd round pick and I use the joke of a reverse Olivier Vernon trade, if they can just release Olivier Vernon and put that $16 million towards, or whatever number, given a contract extension and how the cap works, towards Trent Williams, well, okay, let's see what you can do there, right? You got a starting level left tackle, and then you can still draft Tristan Wirfs at 10. You can still draft Becton or Thomas or Wills at 10 and put them in at right tackle, and then go from there and just have 2 really good tackles. Because again, my belief is you need 2 really good tackles. Or screw it. And I said this on Twitter almost jokingly, but if Jason Peters isn't going to demand a ton of money, so last year he got $6 million and he's a year older and injuries and yada, yada, yada. If Jason Peters is going to demand $5 million, what if you just trade for Trent Williams? So 3rd round pick, the late one they got for Duke Johnson. So Duke Johnson for Trent Williams is a great deal. And then you pay him what you need to pay him. And so now you have your left tackle. Then you sign Jason Peters for $5 million to be your right tackle. And then for 1 year. And then you have Tristan Wirfs as your right guard, who can move and go all over the place. And he can get acclimated to the NFL. And then next year he moves over to right tackle. Besides spending your assets, which again is money, a 3rd round draft pick and the number 10 pick, what's wrong with that? Now, it's unrealistic, it's unlikely, all of those things, I get it. But what's wrong with it, right? You're spending assets, you're spending money, but you're upgrading your offensive line to a point of not only for this year, but for years down the road. Now, what they do with the defense at that point in time would be really interesting. But again, it's just about adding talent, good teams. And to be honest, I wonder sometimes if we've gotten to this point where we as fans and we as media have focused on what teams aren't good at versus the idea of really focusing on what teams can be good at. And so, the Kansas City Chiefs have done a lot to make their offense great. They drafted Mecole Hardman even though they had everybody that they have. They have the Cheetah, they have Sammy Watkins, they have Travis Kelce. They have all of those guys, and still they drafted Mecole Hardman. Now, some of it may have been because of Ty Hill's legal issues and concerns, but I wonder if the Browns, given what is available, right, given who is available, free agency or trade, and in the NFL draft, could just decide to say, you know what, let's make what we could be great at, let's make it great, right? So again, in my imagination that I just presented, that offensive line could be Trent Williams, Joel Bitonio, J.C. Treader, Tristan Wirfs, and Jason Peters. That could be the 5 across. Now again, is it likely? Probably not. But Jason Peters at 38 years old is only going to want a 1-year deal anyways. So again, how all of a sudden, how good is Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt and OBJ and Jarvis Landry and Baker Mayfield, David Njoku, possibly Rashard Higgins, whoever, how good is that offense if you have those 5 dudes? And that's really the question. With those 5 dudes, what could you do? And so, again, it's just great for an offseason that the Cleveland Browns are looking for a position that also has answers. Whether they'll find them or will they frustrate me, right? Will they frustrate you? Will they instead try to sign the off-injured Brian Bulaga? Will they try to sign, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, but Big V out of Philadelphia, who I am not high on, and maybe because Andrew Berry was there, he knows them enough. Like, will that be somebody they look at? You know, those are ways that they could frustrate me. I'm not as high on Austin Jackson as others, but you know, do they go in that direction? Here's the thing. I just want them to be better, and I really value the offensive line. And so, unfortunately, they have too many needs to be filled this offseason. But I wonder if going all in one area instead of kind of trying to patch every area may be a smarter way of going about it for the Cleveland Browns. Thank you for stopping by Mueller in the Morning here on the Mueller Sports Report. Again, my name is Jared Mueller. You can get a hold of me on Twitter at Jared K. Mueller. That's JaredKMueller. Thank you. Have a great Friday. Be good to yourself and be good to others.